about Tiny Tina's Wonderland. And for the first time on the podcast, we have my husband, Scotty Licious. I will never call you that again.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
I already know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's a new one for me. I have never heard that before from you, but you know what?
Scotty
That's
to
okay.
Hate.
Oh no. Okay, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Scott's one and only appearance on Bonus XP. I'll take Scotland. Scotland I can take. Yeah.
So
no, thanks.
Scottish. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Normally, for the many listeners at home, normally I'm on the other side of things, working on the website and making sure that all the episodes, get on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. But today I'm on mic.
Yeah, it's weird recording with someone who's actually on the same time zone. And not only are you on the same time zone, but you are also on the same internet.
Yes, we were on the same internet, just I'm terrible at distance, but however many feet away and not states away.
I don't like distance either.
But we're not states away. We're just rooms away.
All right, enough of us being cute. Let's talk about games, the real reason we're here. So
yeah.
We recently just played through Tiny Tina's Wonderland, and we got it on launch, and then we kind of put it aside because the summer got really weird, and then we picked it back up, started fresh, and went through it again. This is not your first foray into a Borderlands game, so I'd love to touch on that a little bit here in a sec, but let's just talk simply about what did you like about Tiny Tina?
Well, for starters, generally speaking, I loved it. Like, I loved Tiny Tina's Wonderland for a lot of different reasons. One, obviously it was fun to play a game with you, but I don't know, there was just so much to like about it. It was super cute. It was super funny. Most of the gameplay was fun. The characters were hilarious. I mean, Tina is one of my favorite characters from Borderlands, so the fact that she has her own game that she's like narrating and running was, I loved.
Is it not strange to think that this whole thing spurred from a DLC that hit really well? We played that DLC together, possibly twice.
We did play it twice.
Yeah, once as like the full package of Borderlands 2, and then once the little offshoot mini re-release they did that didn't require Borderlands 2 at all. But this game was literally, I say literally a lot. There it is again. It stemmed from the success of that DLC, and I think it works for the most part, right?
Yeah, it did work for the most part. I love that they listened, right? Like, it obviously went over so well that they were like, oh, maybe we should just make this entire game. Because we loved playing the DLC. Yeah, we did it twice, which obviously means we liked it, especially because I'm not one to play. I mean, I'm not a huge gamer, so it's big for me to beat a game. It's even bigger for me to go through and play something again. So it was so much fun, and it is awesome that how long was the DLC, do you think?
Oh, it's only like 3 or 4 hours, maybe. It's pretty short.
Yeah, so it was cool to see them take, the 2 or 3 hour DLC and then blow it up into this huge game, which we should have checked. But how much time do you think we clocked on Tiny Tina?
Oh God, maybe right in the 20s, like mid to late 20 hour, because we did most of the side quests until we got to the end, and then I could just kind of tell that the energy was a lot lower for the game, and I kind of felt like it overstayed its welcome at that point. So we just were like, okay, let's just do the main quest now and just like jump through it.
Yeah,
but they were just like the little side quests. It wasn't like the ones that actually opened up new areas or anything like that.
Yeah, and I guess we can get into a little bit of that, kind of what you were saying there for a second. We can get into that in a little bit, but
tell me some specifics. Like what specifically did you like about it? Like, what was this is a game for me, or this is something that people should play? Because that's one of the nice things about these bonus XPs is, we're kind of hinting at, hey, maybe this is something that you should play, or maybe this is something that you should stay away from. What would those things be?
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk from my perspective as again as someone who's not like I'm not a
Who else's perspective would you talk from?
well, I could generalize, like we've talked about what we liked about it and I could assume what other people would like, but like my perspective specifically, I liked that it was really lighthearted. There was so much story to it, but it was all fun and often very funny. The all the characters were, famous or the voice actors were famous people outside of games that I
You're
knew
like
from outside of
Wanda
games.
Sykes, Andy Samberg. What's the other SNL guy who was on there?
Was it Will Arnett?
Yeah, and Will Arnett were all on there, which is
Yes.
pretty great. And then, I mean, there were more that kind of pop up as side characters as you go.
Yeah, so I mean they were all great. I mean the characters themselves were great. I think Tina Tina was the only character from Borderlands, right? Like the all the other ones were kind of new.
Yeah, everyone was kind of new. I feel like just kind of like the DLC from Borderlands 2, there might have been some like parallelisms to what was going on in Borderlands 2, but it wasn't as like heavy as it was in Borderlands 2 because the DLC in that is very like a retelling of what happens in there from Tina's like RPG fantasy perspective. This was
Yeah.
definitely some things where you're like, oh, that character kind of gives me Roland vibes in
Yeah,
here.
and
But yeah,
they did they alluded to a lot of the Borderlands characters and some of the plots. And a lot of times it was just on like slide comment or yeah, like side comments and jokes. So I don't think you necessarily have to play Borderlands in order to play Wonderlands, but
oh, definitely not.
yeah, it did add a layer of like intelligence but also humor, knowing that they were making fun of Handsome Jack and they were making fun of like other characters here and there. And then
Right,
I
like
guess
you if
Claptrap,
you had
yeah.
never played if you had never played one before and you get to like the Jack and the Beanstalk world and you're wondering why there's this muscle man that is like a fairy in a tutu, you get how hilarious it is knowing that that is Brick's character from Borderlands. Like it's those little things that you appreciate if you know the series, but again, like you said, you don't have to. It doesn't change anything if you didn't.
Right. Yeah. So I like that. And knowing that we played each of the Borderlands a couple times now. It was, I don't know, it was just really impactful. And it made me, as a non gamer, really, it made me, I don't know, me feel comfortable knowing that, oh, yeah, like I get these jokes. This is an environment that I'm comfortable and familiar with. Um, which is kind
How
of
did you
another,
feel about the fantasy classes this time around and whatnot? Especially being for someone who's not uh, a big skill tree, creating the build. How did all that work and play out for you?
um, so it was balanced. There was a lot that I really liked about it, but at the same time, there was a lot that I didn't like about it. And what I mean by that is like it was nice. So I guess we could have said like if you haven't played Wonderlands or if you don't fully know what it is, like it's obviously Borderlands adjacent, but it's the entire time you're playing a D&D campaign. Or sorry, it's not D&D. It's
Yeah,
what is it called in the game?
is
Uh
it G and
Bunkers and
G?
Badasses.
But B and B, yeah, bunkers and
Yeah,
badasses, right?
Bunkers and Badasses. So you're not playing D&D, you're playing a Bunkers and Badasses campaign with Tiny Tina as the bunker master. So number one, that's just hilarious. So I liked that they deviated from the traditional classes from from Borderlands, like Lawbringer and whatever else. So I like that they were a little more geared toward like traditional D&D or B&B classes. Like to me they were a little more like, hey, we're making fun of D&D here
Well,
in
yeah, I
these
mean
classes.
that is the whole thing. You have the wizard, you have the paladin, you have the berserker, like you have all those things that are super familiar. But the nice thing is they just do their own little spin on it. Like it's not quite the same as playing as those classes, especially being like a first person shooter. Like it can't be. It
Right.
it can dance around the idea of what a fantasy RPG or a D&D lookalike would be, but I think the only part that really comes close to it is the fact that they added the melee weapons in this, and that instead of throwing grenades like you would normally throw in Borderlands, your spells are, or your grenades are spells.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I like that part of it. I like that it was more heavily influenced from like I like that the classes and things were more heavily influenced from D&D. But kind of what you alluded to a little bit, but it kind of got redundant. Like it was almost not flushed out enough. Um, I think at one point, I mean, I don't always have the mental capacity to to really pay attention to skill trees and like really think them through and like what I want to do and like plan ahead. But this, I think even I don't know, like a third of the way in, I just started throwing my skill points into random stuff because it didn't matter too much. Or I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. I'll just do this.
right. Well, that's the nice thing about a game like this is, it appeals to the general populace, but if you want to min max, then you have the ability to do that. Like someone like me, where I'm not going to look up a guide on how I should build my character, but I know enough about a skill tree and enough about these games that I can decide which abilities I think I should be putting points in. But but it's open enough for you. I think the only time I ever saw it throw you a little bit for a loop is, and I think this was actually something that was kind of cool, but it was also a little bit of a missed opportunity as well, was just like in Dungeons and Dragons, it gives you the opportunity to multi-class. And all you do is you pick up a second class and you can kind of bounce between the two skill trees. I thought it was a really creative way to kind of change from the other games,
Hmm.
but um like you said, you just see the numbers go up. You don't really see that much change. So you'll see your damage go up, your hit points go up, your crit chance go up, but you don't really, your play style is virtually identical to how you're playing when you were just one class. How did you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's kind of what I guess what I meant by like, it was like, there's some pros and cons to it. It's like, yeah, it was great that it's new and it's fun and it's interesting, but that's the other half where, yeah, it didn't feel like it really mattered that much once you started getting into the meat of the game. It kind of was, I don't know. It also ended up, determining what we could pick up. But really, I mean, at least the way we played, it was kind of like, oh, well, I'm just going to use this because I like the effect that it makes. Like, I like that this spell brings 3 tornadoes from the sky, or this one shoots a giant fireball from the ground across the battlefield. It wasn't necessarily because of our classes a lot. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I mean, and again, I think that was the difference between you and me, because I would try to counterpick whatever you would choose, and since I
Yeah.
picked a tankier class than you, a lot of mine were complementary to my class. So some of the spells or the grenades that you could use would create an aura around you, and it would slow enemies, and you could do more damage to them if they were in the
Yeah.
aura. And since I wasn't like a more distant character like you were, that worked for me. It definitely
Hmm.
worked for my character to be up close and personal. But again, I could have switched to more ranged spells and it wouldn't have changed that much. Like you wouldn't have noticed it.
Yeah, it would all fell on preference really. Like we didn't have to intentionally balance out our parties based on what we were doing, but I mean, yeah, but it was still fun. Like all the elements were still fun. Like the naming of everything was fun. Like the effects were really fun most of the time. I mean, some of them got a little redundant, but for the most part, it was, I don't know, it was all still really cool and it was all still really fun.
How do you think this game stacks up to the other Borderlands experiences? So at this point now, you've played all of them except for the first one. We've done Borderlands 2 twice. We've done the pre-sequel twice and Borderlands 3 once. So
Yeah.
where does this land for you? What were some of the good things about it, and what was more of a miss?
Yeah. So I would think, so I really like the Borderlands games for a bunch of reasons. But so Tina, I liked that it was more of the fun, storytelling, goofy. It was a lot more personable. Um, but I kind of like in the regular games, I liked that some of the stuff was more intentional, like the weapons that you were using and needing were a little bit more intentional.
Yeah,
Um,
let's talk about that for a sec. So, one of the things they did that I thought was cool in Wonderland is that they tried to make the weapons look more like something from a steampunk fantasy
mhm.
world where like some of the handguns were crossbows, like rapid fire crossbows and whatnot. But well, and the shotguns were kind of like a magical blast instead of an actual shotgun, but it almost wasn't a push far enough into it to really like bring this into a new world
Yeah.
where, at the end of the day it really was just all of the guns that you would see in Borderlands anyways. And some of the guns literally just looked like they were straight out of Borderlands, and I thought that was a missed opportunity where this might have been the time to really embrace it, of like, what would a fantasy sniper rifle look like, what would fantasy handguns look like, and whatnot, and does everything have to be um a ranged weapon? Let's play with this idea a little bit more, because now it's just falling along the lines of, okay, well, it is just Borderlands, it's
Yeah.
just like a different palette swap, but it's still
Right,
the
like
same game.
right, like you said, like
Yeah,
the melee was a little different in the way they did that, and the way they did the
that
handguns.
was probably the most exciting thing, was the melee, because of all the different like physical weapons you could get. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and like you said, instead of grenades, it was spells, and that was great. But at the same time, like yeah, they didn't really transfer that over to too much to the other weapons, and even like the environment, the way Wonderlands was set up is that half, well, I guess not half, more than half the gameplay was traditional Borderlands gameplay, but in these new worlds. But some of it was in the new like map where it was very cartoony. There were limited actions and stuff. Like it was really fun to get into that, but at the same time, I feel like they also could have taken that a little further.
Oh, so are you talking about the encounters?
No, I'm talking about like the overworld map, like when you're
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the little the
that's what
little
I'm talking
character
about.
with the
So
big head.
let's elaborate on that a little bit. So, as opposed to Borderlands 3 doing this really great interconnected world, or even interstellar world, because you get to go to the different planets, and you get a sense of exploration where you're finding different parts for your motorcycles or different skins for your characters. Wonderland instead, like Scott was saying, throws it all away and has all the places separate, and then you actually go on an RPG-esque world map. And on that world map, you can stop at random little places and clear them out, so you'll have an encounter. And then there's also kind of like random encounters as you go too.
Yeah,
Um, it's kind of filler.
it was, and I feel like it's only filler because they could have done so much cooler stuff. Because it obviously was meant to be like miniatures, like you're playing a tabletop game. Because part of the map that you were walking around on was like there were Cheetos that were bigger than your character, and popcorn, and bottle caps, and
And
these.
like your bottle caps could be the shortcuts through the
Yeah,
maps and
like bottle caps as
whatnot.
bridges. Yeah, like these like huge compared to your character, these like huge everyday things that were, that it could have been a lot cooler, I feel like. I mean, it was cool that they did it, but it
Well,
could
and
have been a lot
it's almost like
cooler.
they kept it too close to the other source material, which is Dungeons and Dragons, where those are things that would happen in D&D, but
Mhm.
I don't think it works as well when you're playing, a digital game. I think that these like very bland encounters, not that something has to be story oriented and it has to be like dialogue or anything like that, I'm definitely not saying that, but it was just kind of like, okay, go here and clear this, okay, cool, I got a random weapon. Maybe the loot needed to be more specific and tailored to, I completed this quest so I got this loot. Or maybe one of the quests was literally clear all the bandit camps in this area, and then you have to go on the map and do that. Just something a little bit more, so it didn't feel like I'm just going to walk into this random ruin or random dungeon just because it's there. And that was a lot of
Yeah.
the places where if there wasn't a quest that directed you there, it just kind of felt like because it's here.
Yeah.
And
Very
I
very
feel like,
much
and the
so.
other border games, land games, aren't like that, because if you want to go somewhere, you can go there, and there is probably something to find, and you have to figure out the platforming sequence in order to get through. Like, there was a sense of exploration where this didn't feel like it had that exciting exploring part of it.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely, especially in compared to the other Borderlands games. But I know I kind of talked about it a little bit, but what did you think about the, and maybe this is because I don't play a lot of, of these kinds of games, and I know how I feel about it, but what did you think about the vast weapons options in Wonderlands versus Borderlands?
So this is something that we talked about while we were playing, and I know in relation to your job and what you do, normally I don't mind the grind of the weapons because that is the purpose. Like, it's a loot game, it's so loot heavy, and you're constantly cycling through loot, and it's a part of
So much
the
loot, just
addictive.
so much loot.
Yeah, and it's a part of the addictive cycle, and like all the games have always been like that. But what was upsetting about this is the user interface, and I know you could probably talk really heavily on this. Where in the other games, it wasn't as tedious to check and compare weapons, and this game it was so difficult to see if something was superior or what added effects it had on it.
Or
Like, you
what even
had to
type
go
it
into a
was.
specific menu, or yeah, it was even
Or what
hard to
even type
tell
it
what type
was,
it
yeah.
was unless you specifically clicked on it and then like hit R3 and really went into checking what it was. And you would sometimes, if you backed out, you would back out completely out of your inventory, and you'd have to load up the entire going through your inventory process again. That was a hassle. So I don't mind the fact that it was a loot cycle, because again, that's just the game. But there were times where we were getting accessories like a ring or a different ring slot, and you'd have two, and like it was so hard to tell which ring you were replacing or why it was better. All of that was really bad. So the loot system, in terms of just like in comparison to the other ones, I think Borderlands 3, maybe 2 did it best, where it was just so easy to tell this is an upgrade, this is why.
Yeah. And it felt like you said, yeah, loot system. Yeah, there's just a lot to sort through. And I felt that way about the Borderlands games, but I could still make sense of it. But in Wonderlands, it was almost too overwhelming. And I think that it was a combination of, yes, the interface was miserable to use, but also it almost seemed like there were more options. Like there was way more loot in Wonderlands. Did you feel that way? Like, am I just making that up?
I think you're just making that up, because
That's
it
fair.
really like especially like we were playing Borderlands 3 at the time an event was happening, if you remember, and there were
Yeah.
times where these like random mobs would spawn, and we
Yeah.
were getting
Legendary after
loot like none
legendary after
other.
legendary.
Yeah, just so many legendaries. And I mean, yeah, I think you might be missing that. I think maybe just the way that we had to handle it was more frustrating. So if that's something that you don't think you can get around, that might be difficult for you. And I
Yeah.
thought, so when we stopped playing the game in May when it came out, it was somewhat time around then. That was actually one of the reasons we stopped, because we were hoping that there would be an interface fix, and it never really changed. It's not so bad that like it just completely breaks the experience, but especially we were same screen playing,
Yeah. Okay. That
so
was my
here
next
we are,
question.
half the screen between the two of us, and then now we just sorting through the menus is just even more tedious.
Yeah. So it's not like it's definitely not broken. It's just clunky and it's just tedious. But I'm glad you mentioned that we did play it on the same screen, and I mean a fairly large TV, but we were split. We did vertical split, and
No, we went back to
horizontal.
Yeah,
That's
because
right.
it was just so annoying.
Yeah. So have you seen gameplay of the regular Wonderlands? Sorry, yeah, Wonderland. Is it any better? Like, are we only griping because?
In terms of what?
Like, are we only griping because we did split screen and that made it harder? Or
No. The user interface is still bad. Like,
still
that's not
clunky?
going to change. It really
Yeah.
is just portioned. It doesn't change anything else.
Yeah.
All right. So overall, final notes. Would you recommend people pick up this game? Is this kind of like even if you're getting it full price, you're still getting your money worth, or is this like get it on a severe sale, or maybe don't play this if this is your first one? What are your thoughts?
I like how this is basically the question you asked me 5 minutes ago that I didn't answer.
Yeah.
Just a little more.
Amazing how that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I loved it. I would absolutely recommend it. I would absolutely play it again. I would even play it by myself. Even like I don't know how well I would do at it, but I I think it's absolutely worth it. I think that it, especially if you like playing games with other people, it's definitely worth it. It's, I don't know, to me, it's just, yeah, it was absolutely worth it, and I would absolutely recommend it. Like, it's so fun for all kinds of gamers. What about you?
I would say if you're casual or like in your gaming, or you already have a group of friends that you play games with, definitely pick it up, because it is, especially for me, even more so than something like Diablo. It's just a better gaming experience because it does require some skill to play and some thought, just because of the essence of being a shooter, and like the constant moving and whatnot, and the game scales difficulty a lot better than Diablo does. But I think if you have played Borderlands, and especially if Borderlands 3 was the last one that you played, it might not be worth picking up, just because I think that was maybe the pinnacle of the series. And there are some parts that, like, this game is now formulaic. I really hope that whatever they do next is very different, and I was hoping that this game was going to be what now, like what now from Gearbox. What
Gotcha.
are we going to
So
see
you don't think it was
differently?
different enough?
No, it definitely wasn't different enough. Like I said, it was mostly just, a new custom palette on the
Yeah, that's
overall
fair.
thing. And like, that's not to discredit the work that anyone did, because there are a lot of great things. Like, it is funny, but just like in Borderlands, eventually the humor gets a little old. The
And repetitive
gameplay,
in times, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it can be a little repetitive, and that is just a part of the grind. But does it have to be? Like, are we challenging ourselves to really push the limits of what a game can be, or are we just doing this to make a quick buck? So I wanna see. I would say, like, get it, but maybe get it when it's on a pretty good sale, when you have that good group to play. It's definitely not worth playing on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. All fair points.
Okay, well, I think that does it. That's a good little wrap up on our thoughts on Tiny Tina's Wonderland. We, of course, want to thank you all for listening, and especially to our Patreon supporters for making this possible. We appreciate you guys and your love and support. If you like Scott being on the podcast, definitely sound off on the Discord, because who knows? Scott would actually have to play games for us to be able to talk about them, and that would make me happy if Scott was playing more games.
But would it make Scott happy? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, who cares? Also, if you're not a Discord person and you want to keep up with the conversation, be sure to head over to our Twitter or Instagram at RPGaymer.
For real, though. Thank you all for listening. Now, go out there